All right, we are live. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another spiritual Substack chat. I think this is number 10. I'm losing count. It's been a marathon this week, and I've had a ton of fun. I am your host, Zzenn, and my Substack is Wizzen Temple, Wizzan, WizzenTemple.com. Would love for you to come by and take a look at it. You can follow to get notes on your feed, or you can subscribe and get notified when I post an article. I have an article dropping tomorrow morning, and also announcements and updates for the Mystery School, Wizard Oracle, and the book that's coming up. And let me see, what else do we have? After publishing this after we complete this podcast, it takes about 30 minutes to render, and then once it renders, you'll see my links and the links of my guest underneath the video. And if you'd like to be on the podcast, go to my profile and send a direct message through my profile page. And there you go. So I want to introduce my guest, Lindsay. Hello, Lindsay.
Hi.
How are you doing?
Great.
Okay, let me just give you the proper intro. So now you see at Witchy Lulu, the name of your Substack is Lindsay Regan. You say, I write to blend academic research. Oh, sorry. 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 You know what happens is it plays live on yours and on mine. And every time I do this, I forget to put my volume down.
It's okay, it happens.
All right. So I write to blend academic research in cult psychology with lived spiritual wisdom to investigate religious trauma and transformation. Right down my alley. Weaving together scholarly analysis and mystical practice to illuminate paths to authentic empowerment for myself and you. Why don't we just do the whole hour on that little paragraph? You want to do that?
Yeah, we could do that. Yeah.
So much there. Wow. Let me show everybody your Substack. We have an article I just am so eager to get into. So this is Lindsay's Substack. At the top here, we have our video playing right now, but just gives you a general idea of what it looks like. Topics such as the panic attack before the pandemic, life of a saint, Emily Pike and the cost of rural disregard, all sorts of interesting stuff here. We're going to go through life of a saint. Let's talk about cults, baby. So, Lindsay, go ahead and share with us. It's Lindsay Regan. Sorry, didn't put your last name
No,
in.
you're
Share
good.
with us a summary of what you're doing, what you're about, what your Substack is about.
Yeah, of course. So my Substack, currently the thing that we're going to talk about is a short series about psychology blended into discovering the application of cults in Mormonism specifically. I was born and raised in the Mormon church. I'm originally from Arizona, and I moved out to New England. I live in southern New England in 2019, I believe, 2018-ish. And I left the church in 2020 during the pandemic. I'm currently on sort of a personal journey of writing a memoir about the time that I spent deconstructing from the LDS church.
Mm-hmm.
But part of that included my return to education to get a bachelor's degree in forensic psychology, focusing mostly on the study of cults.
Wow.
So that is what I work on writing on my Substack, other than little things about like my personal updates with my memoir progress, life updates. I plan to talk a little bit more about witchcraft too, and might dive into that.
Yeah, I'm a survivor of the Worldwide Church of God Armstrongism. You familiar with that? Yeah.
Yes,
So it's all of these offshoots of the Christian Orthodox system. Isn't it interesting how it just like an octopus went out there? Definitely want to talk about the witchcraft. and then I wanna hear about whatever story you want to share about your experience. We also have Life of a Saint. Let's talk about cults, baby. I started reading that and I just stopped. I'm like, no, I don't want to read anymore. I want to unpack this. So how about we do the talk a bit about your what you feel like you'd like to share about your experience in the cult, and then a little bit about how you moved into being a witch, identifying as a witch, correct?
Yeah,
And almost don't like to say identifying. I think it's something if you feel it, and someone says has said to me, well, I don't have like bloodline witchcraft, and I like, do you have a feeling and a resonance and a desire? Well, there you go. Where did that come from, right? So
exactly.
I'd love to hear about that. So how about a little bit about the church and your experience, and then how you moved into the desire for this, and then we'll unpack your article.
Yeah, of course. So, like I said, I was born and raised in the church. My mother's side of the family mostly comes from Utah. Um, Very long, long ancestral ties to the beginning of the founding with Joseph Smith
Okay.
and the original founders of the
Wow.
church. Yes. So my family has almost always been Mormon on that side. My father's side is not Mormon. They're from New England, mostly Irish Catholic. But being raised in the church, I also experienced, because I'm from a small town in Arizona. So I'm from Globe, which is about
Okay.
50 miles out of Phoenix, I would say. I'm not great
Okay.
with the location description, but being from there, my mother at a very young age sent me to a private Catholic school. And that was sort of the beginning of like my dive into religion. So I sort of saw that like religion had a very wide array of things that you could believe in outside of just Mormonism and the
Now,
application of the Bible and things like that.
why did she send you to a Catholic church if you were in the Mormon church?
That is a great question. My mom's side of the family is very Republican, and they
Okay.
really did not like public school. Like they were very against public
Oh,
schools.
okay.
So my
Okay. So
mom,
Montessori.
yes, my mom was a teacher and worked at the Catholic school, and that's how she got us, the Mormon kids, to be there.
I
But
see.
being there,
Got it.
also we had to study Catholicism. So my brother actually, when we were there as students, my brother like won the Catholic spelling bee over all of
Hmm.
the Catholic students, which was kind of silly as the Mormon kids. Um, but yeah, it was a very interesting experience. Growing up Mormon, my family was very strict on many of the rules that apply. But being in such a rural area of Globe, we had a very tight-knit community that really leaned in on those like cult behaviors of
Mm,
information control, social control dynamics that really integrated into the community. When I left, and before as I was diving into witchcraft, but my my leaving sort of started me down this path of like real emotional breakthroughs. I first had like a major panic attack, which is one of the other posts on my Substack. But
mm,
I went and I spent like maybe a month in a mental facility on suicide watch.
mm.
And when I was there, I took a lot of cognitive behavioral therapy classes and learned a lot about the models in which our bodies sort of become accustomed to those situations that we're put in as children. And part of that is coercion with the Mormon church. So I think that there is a huge connection between our emotional thought patterns, our behaviors, and the way that that reflects in our communities. And so that's why I'm
Yeah.
so passionate about talking about cults, especially when it comes to spirituality and going forward as we, especially in America, step away from these Christian religions and
Yeah.
start to develop our own paths.
Yeah, because they're ripped off. They're ripped off. It's an orthodoxy invented story that was ripped off from the ancient world. It's like, sorry, but virtue did not start in the year of our Lord. Quite the
Yeah,
opposite, right? I wrote an article about this topic that and again, I think most Christians are generally good people. They want the right thing, Mormons, but they don't realize the trap that they're in. And it's like, they're brainwashed to think that we are the arbiters of morality and stuff, and yet if you read their books and look at their actions, right? That everybody's going to hell if they don't obey and submit, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, no, no, actually, morality and ethics is actually wired into nature,
Yeah.
And so it's not like the pagans are evil. And that's the idea. It's either you're a Christian and you're Mormon, whatever, or you're going to hell. It's like there's no middle ground. I'm curious, when you reflect back on your Montessori period of time, is there anything about that that you might look back on and think that there were some good things about that gave you sort of a sense of ethical upbringing versus being raised in a situation where you ended up, you know, on fentanyl and completely, you know what I mean? Completely the opposite side. Like there were some grapes that you gleaned from that, or is there a different way that you look at
Absolutely.
that?
No, absolutely. And that's why when I first, so my moral conundrum that really broke me away from being Mormon was two things: their over accumulation of wealth and their covering up of sexual assault and abuse within the church.
Mm,
And those two things broke my shell. And so when I left, um, and as like during my time as like saying, well, I'm just going to be an atheist. I don't believe in anything. And then, sort of peeling back the layers of being like, I do believe in something. I don't know what that is. Sort of jumped onto Satanism, sort of jumped
mhm,
into like Wiccan, being, then identifying as pagan, and eventually just falling onto the term of witch because of how I see myself as someone who stands beyond everything that's happened to her, really. I don't Obviously, I have some familial ancestry back to the Salem witch trials, but I don't
mhm,
necessarily see myself in that position, right?
right.
My title of a witch is more about the ability for me to integrate everything that I find important about my experience and my
Yes.
educational learning. And that is
Mm,
in anything, you know. Today, so I'm also very in line with a lot of the writing groups here in Providence. And so today I went to a writing group and all I did was read about the existence and erasure of Emma Smith, who was Joseph Smith's wife, because
mhm,
it really has been a calling to me to think about her experience in the
mhm,
founding of the church, and how she was erased by a lot of the leadership. So those are the types of things that I find to be so important to my soul, and the reason why I
mm.
integrate myself as a witch and I define myself as that.
And I want to clarify something for everybody, because I think some people are like, well, what does this witch thing mean? If you are a practicer, if you practice witchcraft, the
Mm.
system of witchcraft rooted in nature, because all of these systems, I mean, they're all archetypical reflections of the inner soul path. If you are
Yeah.
practicing the wizened path, you're a wizened.
Mhm.
You can still call yourself, I mean, you can still, as you're involved in this, but if I was going to be practicing Thelema, I would be a Thelemite, right?
Yeah.
And so if you are practicing it, you are a witch. And the problem with it's like if you're a yogi, you're a yogi, you know what I mean? But the problem with the word witch is it's been corrupted by orthodoxy. And I think what's happening now is, I know definitely for me and dragon, rooted back into the ancient dragon cultures through the work of Nicholas DeVere and Lawrence Gardner, as well, but mostly DeVere's work, and Tracy Twyman, who worked with DeVere. I just had a lot of experiences with this work. People can debate back and forth about the bloodlines and such, but I do feel like what's happening is the ancient ways coming back in a spiritual way, in which you can call yourself a Christian and it's like, okay, it's socially acceptable, right? You call
Yes.
yourself a witch and it's like, oh my god, and yet
Yes.
there is evidence that the original Christians were witches. Mhm.
Correct.
And it isn't the corrupted version of orthodoxy that it got turned into.
Yeah, and I really, my identification with this term and this person of myself um, does relate back to a lot of the women who were like originally coined as witches simply for having knowledge,
Yeah.
simply for wanting to learn, wanting to share the good things that they did.
Yes.
And yeah, that's why I am the way that I am, because I think that it's
And it
more
was,
important that we, especially as a society, begin to take some of the knowledge that we've gained and integrate it into ourselves and not just see it as, okay, people study that. People,
yeah,
other people are specialists in those things. No, it's time that we see the important work that other people have done and to integrate them within ourselves so that
mm,
we stop having this separation of like, well, my religion doesn't say that I can't believe in medicine. I can't believe that people are LGBTQ or identify as non-binary. It's time that we begin to
right.
integrate those teachings and those very serious study work that's been done.
Yeah.
That's what I'm like interested to know what you thought about my article, because I did try to integrate a little bit more personally instead of like writing like Stephen Hassan, who is the father of a lot of the cult fight models, than more than what he has done. But
Well, let's dive into it. Yes. There's so much on this topic, and especially when you're a survivor, um, and when you start to look at this from a perspective, when you lift up the hood on this
mhm,
thing globally, and you see that religion is a socially acceptable cult. What are you talking about? It's not a cult, and you touch on this too. Uh, one group, one leader, one way, one book, or die.
yeah,
No, that's not, yeah, it is.
yeah,
You know, it's about love. No, it's not.
yeah,
It's about control and you having the illusion and the feeling of love, right?
correct, yes, and it's most important. There is so much discussion now online about I know mostly about the Mormon Church, but about Christian religion um, being a cult, and people are very scared to use that word because of its ties to like the Satanic Panic and things like that, and when
Right.
the words were really changed. But I think that it's time that we push all of that aside and integrate the idea. If you were raised in a system that follows these ideas that like you said only has one person who's in charge who tells you that you have to do things one way or not, it's
Yeah.
likely you were raised in a cult, and that
Yeah.
is so important for an identity purpose after being in a cult.
Mm, mm. Isn't it interesting that I find it interesting that the number three is the magical number of magic,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah,
Because it's always the third element. When they're
yeah,
in the two, it's either this way or that way. Anytime any human is in a this way or that way, they're missing the third element. And that's
yeah.
where magical creation occurs. Um,
Everything
just
really lives in the gray, like it's never black and white. Everything is just shades of
right.
gray.
Yeah, I mean the just sacred geometry shows how life works in the tetrahedron,
Yeah,
and how that whole thing works. And the interesting thing about and so it stops it stops it arrests religion arrests maturation. So you have adult children who believe in daddy and mommy, and then that short circuited thinking where it's either you go to hell or you join us, and it stops them from penetrating, looking past the book cover. For instance, when I first read the Satanic Bible by Anton LaVey, it
hmm,
was a terrifying thing to even pick it up. Oh my God, I'm going to be
yeah,
possessed, right?
yep,
Hell. Once I read it's a perfect deprogramming book for orthodoxy. That's why
yes,
Left Hand Path, they emphasize it a lot in this culture because of the Christian nationalism and the programming to undo that thou shalt that's installed in your system.
yeah,
And so Anton LaVey, a lot of people don't know, is they were atheists. They didn't even believe in the devil, right? And in the Bible, his the Satanic Bible, he says never harm a child and never harm an animal, right?
Mm.
And then they never take the time to look into it because, and so he had a lot of fun with torturing Christians because he knew where he was at, right? And their interpretations of that. I don't, I explored the church and all of that. I wouldn't join it. I wouldn't recommend it. It's another thing. But if it's your thing and you want to do it, do it. Explore it. But like, they have their own thing. It just depends on what you want to do. But I didn't. I found it very interesting. So
That's
let's go. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, that's also very important to this discussion, especially when we talk about spirituality. I think
Yeah.
I don't touch on this in the article, but one thing that I really wanted to say when I was here speaking with you is that it's so important that as we move into this sphere of everybody integrating the knowledge into themselves, that that your body and your intuition is going to keep you on the right path. And that includes not falling into a cult, right? And that
Yes.
includes
Yes.
not like knowing when things become authoritarian over your life.
Yes.
And it's so possible. Like, I think people think that you are either born into a cult or you're really stupid to fall for a cult. And that's
Mm,
not the
yeah.
case.
No.
Anybody can fall for it. It
Yeah.
it's less about stupidity and more about like finding your own ways to educate yourself on the topics that are
Yeah.
actually being presented to you.
Yes. I think unless you know going through what I've gone through, and what you've gone through, and all the things I've learned, like through Scientology and mind control and all of that, people don't quite understand how susceptible we are as storytelling animals, and
Yes.
how our psyche, or how easily hypnotized we are as well.
Yes.
And that's where all of this happens. So, life of a saint, let's talk about cults, baby. So, I'm thinking, yeah, let me just start with this, and you
Okay.
could comment on this like we did in yesterday's stream. Whenever I sit with people and the topic of my memoir, upbringing comes up, religion isn't far behind. I love these discussions. They feel necessary, especially now as shifting political and religious landscapes dislodge ancient certainties. We're collectively being invited to replant remains in healthier soil. And often, the first thing people say when I mention I was raised Mormon is something about polygamy. But
Yes.
more often than you'd expect, they follow it with a different kind of question. Wait, I think I was raised in a cult too.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yep.
So that's,
I There was actually like I was in another writing group, and I sort of started having this discussion with a woman, and she says, You study cults? I think I was raised in a cult." And I had to tell her the way that I feel about it. And I said, "You know what? If you think you were raised in a cult, it's very likely you were raised in a cult."
mm, right.
Yeah,
Yeah, all of a sudden the blinders go up. You're like, well, I didn't know what it looked like.
exactly.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. If you were raised Christian, it's a cult. It's a socially acceptable cult.
very
You
likely.
know.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, it's one way or the highway, you know.
Yeah,
And not just the highway, but eternal soul torture.
yeah,
And because it's so systemic and it's so natural for people, and we got churches all over the place, right? That's not natural. That's a horror.
yeah.
How dare you say that to somebody's soul? Where do you get it that it's okay that you can even do that? You know,
High the definition of higher power due to white supremacy, probably, or male patriarchy.
of a higher power.
Yeah, like from this defined uh long-standing history that patriarchy and white supremacy has had within Christianity, especially now in this
Mhm.
country where Christian nationalism is on the rise. It's
Yes,
that
and
idea
but
that like there's somebody else that I can pin
Sure.
my worries to, or my like divine purpose, that
Right.
overtakes the violence.
The only thing with that, because there's a history uh with white supremacy, and then there's also a history of just white all over the place that isn't white supremacy.
Mhm.
And then there's every color across the board that has adopted Christianity, the Native Americans. It's really strong in Africa. So I tend to look at it as simply the male, the anima, the male
Yeah.
impulse that's out of balance, right? Because I tend to shy a little bit away from the white supremacy terminology, without discrediting it, of course, um, just because I'd rather personally have people look at the nature of the human animal, and what our tendency to go off balance, because the whole point is the balancing of the two. The Kundalini is the balancing
Yeah.
of the two. It's the alchemical marriage. So if
Yes.
anytime somebody, yeah, but when it comes to the church and the matriarchal societies, this is where I really get on the patriarchy. I've seen, anytime they're infected with that meme, no matter who they are, it triggers that male dominance and subservience. Do you know who Andrew Wilson is?
I do not.
Uh, Maybe it's good that you don't know who he is.
Okay.
There's a whole toxic masculine Christian get back to burning the witches crap that's in America. Have you heard it, like the Andrew Tate's energy and all
I
that
do know
crap?
about the Andrew Tates. I do not know about who you just mentioned, but of course, yes, the Andrew Tates, Nicholas Fuentes, um, that sort of let's really get
Yeah.
women back in the kitchen and having babies, barefoot and pregnant down on the farm
Oh
type
my
of.
God.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, can you just keep, listen, I don't care what anybody else says. I know people react differently, but the Kirk guy who was just shot, people have differences on that. This is just me. I don't care who you are. I come from my heart and I come from my soul. That's a part of me in a different form. I come from a soul level. So I've seen people online that are just whatever. I won't be part of anybody celebrating another person's death, because I'm
No, of course
awake,
not.
I'm alive, I'm aware, and I know I see the other through the eyes, right? But dear God, can you keep your damn religion to yourself? I mean, his whole thing, I respect him and anybody else on the left or right that has the courage to stand up for what they believe, right?
Hmm.
But it's just like separation of church and state, folks. Did you ever remember that one? Did you ever think that maybe it's offensive to those of us who don't follow that, where you're talking about your God and your Jesus and swearing the presidents into power through the Bible, which is it clearly, from my position, and I think I could prove it, an evil book. If you take your happy Jesus goggles off and look at that thing,
Yeah.
it's a horror. I mean, it
Yeah.
really is. So,
I agree.
yeah, it's constantly Jesus, 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 Jesus. Do you even care about anyone else? I mean, did you ever think it might be offensive to us who come from a
Yeah.
different bloodlines,
Yeah.
right?
It's very hard. It's especially interesting to talk about the Charlie Kirk uh, assassination, because I find it fascinating that it did happen in Utah, and it was from a Mormon young man who was his
Yeah.
assassinator.
Oh, that's
Um,
right. That's right.
yes, yes,
Interesting.
it's incredibly fascinating. Um, one, on the corporate religion side that the Mormon Church is, because immediately after the shooting and as he was declared dead, the church came out and said, like, we are against violence. We do not condone gun violence in our state, in our religion. We are against it. But they haven't spoken about things like Gaza. They have not spoken about genocide that's happening
Mm.
across the country. And all of these different situations of violence, they never spoke about it. So it's fascinating. And then in the search, in the manhunt, finding out that he was LDS, it opens up a completely different Pandora's box that the church has been trying to shut for decades. So
Mm.
that is the part that's fascinating to me. Not necessarily so much of the loss of Charlie Kirk himself, um, because I agree with you. He was a very rough figure, I think. Obviously, that doesn't mean that he deserved the untimely
No, I
demise
mean
that he
he
did.
was a
But
good father, and
yes,
um, you know, but yeah. Anyway, go ahead.
yeah, he was a rough figure, I think. Definitely stood for a lot of the things that we are talking against, and the supremacy of Christian nationalism in this country.
Yeah.
Definitely contributed to that. But yeah,
But I did appreciate, and see, this is the way I am. I can appreciate good and bad across the political spectrum. I don't join the political
yes,
cults. I did appreciate that he was willing to have the conversation. I'd appreciate anybody who actually wants to have the conflicting conversation. When I was in the podcast with Michael, and I apologize. I keep forgetting his last name. He's an author, and he has Celtic roots and such. And we got into the Christian thing, right? And I
yeah,
pushed back hard, right? And there were some people that said they were really cheering on the. Oh, please. Oh, good. I'm so glad they turned that off. There are people that the van life is very interesting. I will be completing my van life here in the beginning of the year, but situational awareness I have found with humans, some humans.
doesn't exist most of the time.
And when I first started this, because I'm out in the desert and it's just beautiful out there.
Oh, gorgeous, especially in
There,
Arizona.
this is a whole story of me being in this, but I'm looking forward to setting up having a place, setting up a studio. It's just I've learned so much with this. But anyway, it's just fascinating to me the lack of situational awareness where somebody like it'll be 8 o'clock at night, somebody pulls up next to me and they turn on their generator, right? And
Yeah,
then last night, for the past 3 nights where I've been staying, somebody at about 9 o'clock takes out their little dog and it does this for hours. Ruff, 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 ruff,
yeah.
ruff, ruff, ruff. And I'm
Not
like,
even
and
like aware that there's other people around sometimes. It's just, yeah, like you said,
literally me and other people were driving away, turning up and driving away, and they're still sitting there oblivious.
yeah,
And so I just stopped. Like I got to a point in my life when I realized the nature of humans that are um they don't have situational awareness because they're just asleep, right? And I
yeah,
just stopped trying to do anything. I just go, okay, and I relocate,
yeah,
right? And this topic alone, we could apply to everything that we're talking about in this conversation.
yes. Yeah, that's true. That's a very good point because it's hard, especially like I not to get it too much into a leaving Mormonism tangent, but when you do leave a like, and I know I talk bad about the corporation of Mormonism itself, but I have a lot of very close and dear friends who are still LDS, who still are members of the church,
Hmm.
and many of them like it took a lot of my own speaking out for them to sort of understand the severity of what is happening within the LDS church because it's easy for especially Mormons to like sort of push away what happens in the world. And I think it's easy for us
Right.
all to do this, but when I was LDS, one of the things that was taught is uh, that you are in the world but not of the world. And this is a topic
Yeah.
I plan to write about on my Substack, but um that topic is really easy for us to separate ourselves from violence that is actively happening directly on our eyes, literally like on our phones. And
Yeah.
like it's so it's so fascinating for that situational awareness, like you said. It is.
Yeah. And that goes back to separating us from nature,
Yeah.
demonizing the world, the nature's under the fall. And you know why is because what better way to keep humans inactive so that the powers that be can run the show
Yeah.
is to teach humans, dissociate humans from the natural realm.
Yeah.
You
And to
you know what I mean?
disconnect us from ourselves. and our
Yeah,
natural being. Yeah.
yeah. It's a fascinating thing when I began to unpack the the script, the Orthodox script, um, and the systemic shame that it has been in. It's like food coloring, you know. Even if you weren't raised, uh, with religion, you still drive by a church every day, and subconsciously it's instilled. Now, listen, I love sitting in a Catholic church because I
Oh,
can,
me too.
right? The
Yes.
scent, and I love the smell, and it brings, as a little child, I walked into a church, but I can interpret the symbolism,
Yeah.
right? And I can look at that bloody sacrifice, and I can also see how it was used.
Yes. Yeah. That
This
too.
horrible thing, right? And people praise it. I've had Christians go, there's a guy on YouTube who did a video on me calling Zzenn the serpent worshiper. It's great. And
Oh, jeez.
yeah, I had him I did a debate with him on my last channel.
Yeah.
And oh my God, like he literally made an argument for Jonah in the whale. And I said, I am trying not. I told him, I said, you're embarrassing yourself here. I go, I don't
Yeah.
really have to be condescending and, rude, but Zan the serpent worshiper. And I explained to him the serpent was corrupted. It represented wisdom in the ancient world. You have the
Yeah.
serpent in your spine,
Yeah.
Mister. Um, all right, let's move forward. So that's when the real conversation began. When you were talking about person said, "Oh, I've been raised in a cult too." My therapist suggested that I might have been raised in a cult around the pandemic. Her first recommendation was to look into Scientology. I'm an
Yes.
ex-Scientologist. I've studied that sucker front to back. That's a story.
It's fascinating.
And eat the grapes, spit the seeds out. I learned a hell of a lot from that. Hubbard, that's why I always say eat the grapes, spit the seeds out. Hubbard
Yeah.
was onto some shit. I mean, he was onto some stuff, you know.
Yeah. I mean, I think that one of the things that I know you mentioned this in the beginning of our chat, but some of the grapes that I did hold on to from leaving the LDS church is the search for personal faith and belief. And I agree with you. There's even though like Scientology divulged into a cult
Yeah.
and that Mormonism divulged into a cult, I still think that in its very early beginnings of Joseph Smith looking for what he wanted to believe in
Yes.
is
Yes.
the most human foundational thing that anybody else experiences.
Yes.
Yeah, and
Yes.
that includes if you come out on the other side and you think that there is nothing, that nothing,
Yeah.
like my dad just believes in the theory of chaos, and that's totally
Uh,
fine. That's
yeah.
him, and I think that that's one of the most human foundations that religion really rips away from you and gives you
Yes.
instead this set of rules. And so like you said, I do have the grapes, and that's like one of the grapes that I still hold on to.
Yeah, because if you're not open to learning, I mean, life can speak to you through any, it's like the political spectrum.
Yeah.
I really try to stay away from it because on both sides of it, I've shared my independent opinion. Both sides have accused me of being on the other side. I'm like, no, I'm just sharing my thoughts about it.
Yeah.
I mean, I wish I could wipe the whole damn thing off of the table so everyone could just think openly, right? What about the third element? Let's think about a third element.
Okay.
I can think of all sorts of ideas. In fact, I'm part of what I'm doing. The whole thing about this soul growth is to raise a civilization that can grow into itself organically, right? But if you're not open to learn from a freaking rock or a chihuahua or, you know what I mean? And yet also you have to define your boundaries. I'm very, 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 um, as you are, I'm sure, can you hear that? It's super loud.
It's okay. I can still hear you, and
Okay,
that's the important part. We're connecting
okay,
here
good.
on this
I'm a
wavelength.
I'm hypersensitive to sound, and so
Mm.
when somebody plays sound where you can hear it outside of their vehicle, it's always like, "Ah, okay." So oh, good, they're gonna drive away. Off you go. Okay. So this drew me to the application of psychology on cults. I picked up as many books as I could find on a wide variety of topics. The first book that caused me to start retying those strings together was The Lucifer Effect by Philip Zimbardo, who passed in October 2024. Zimbardo is the architect of